Good morning, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So today we are talking about collaboration at the ABP Conference in the session. My name is Nikki Thompson, and I'm going to be facilitating the panel discussion with 4 professionals that we've got here today who I'll introduce very shortly. So firstly, I would like to give a really big special thanks to our gold sponsors. So that's be Lumina Learning, Apta Solutions, and Comms Multilingual. So thank you very much to them. If you'd like to find more about them, please check out the ABP website. We also have a host of workshops this week with our sponsors. So please do go and see if you can join some of those sessions this week. So we also are recording the session. So for those who either can't make the full session or can't make it, it is going to be repeated again today between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. So you'll have that opportunity to have a listen and get engaged with the wonderful topics we're going to be going through today. So we have 4 industry professionals joining us today who have all had collaboration at their heart of everything that they do and their work. So they'll be sharing their insights, their knowledge, and their opinions, I suppose, on some of the really difficult questions I've posed for them. So it's with great pleasure I introduce David Hawkins, who's the Chief Operating Officer and Knowledge Architect for the Institute of Collaborative Working, the ICW, and has 40 years a career experience in projects and procurement in construction and manufacturing. We have Dr. Eliane Algaard, Operations Director at SSEN, who has over 20 years experience in infrastructure asset management in rail, water, and electricity. Thirdly, we've got Jeremy Campbell. So he's an Executive Director in Sales and Marketing for MCOR Group and has 20 years in facilities management, working in life sciences, defense, utilities, as well as the public sector. And lastly, but not least, we've got Steve Abrahams, is a quality business improvement collaborative working professional with 35 years experience. He's currently working in defense and security sector. So he has also worked in media, banking, IT business services, and government departments. So we have quite a range of backgrounds and quite an interesting panel who's going to offer some really fascinating insight. I think more than ever, we've got collaborative working at the hearts and minds of everything we're trying to do, especially in COVID times right now. So the questions are going to be geared around what we can do in terms of the industry, what are the different industry insights, and then what are we doing in terms of culture and behavior as well. So first, we've got our first question. What does authentic collaborative working mean to you or look like in your field of work or across your industry? So to my panel, I'd like you to open the doors. Anyone would like to have a go at this question? Should we start with Steve? Steve, I've got you first on my camera, so.
Fine, yeah.
No pressure.
Couldn't hear anybody else, that's fine. Yeah, for us, it's really seamless. So it's one team working together to achieve a shared goal. That's simply what we're looking at in Babcock. And really, it's because we work with a lot of customers who have 24/7 services. And so we have to be completely integrated with them to make sure that that actually happens and continues. So we also have shared risk registers. That's one of the key things that we always try and do to make sure that we know exactly what the customers are wanting, what we're wanting, and share the risk of how we move forward and the benefits, of course. And also recently, for us, how did it work for us recently? We had a customer who'd left us for another provider, and basically a month in they couldn't actually provide what they were going to do, and because we had a very good relationship before with the customer, they gave us a phone call and we were able to come back and take over and work with them to provide the service and their air ambulance service. So in these times of COVID, right at the forefront of what's going on. So they need to be operational quickly, and we managed to go back in, re-establish the relationships and get going. And that's what it's about. It's working together. It's if we lose something, it doesn't matter, we'll come back and we'll work together to make sure something happens. And it's the trust and adaptability of people. That's the other key thing, to make sure that you can trust the other person, the customer or the supplier that you're working with. They can trust you, and that you're also both parties are adaptable as well to what actually happens.
Great, thank you. So the rest of my panel.
Can I go next, please? If that's all right. I absolutely agree with Steve on the trust piece and building relationships. But for me, I think there are three points around authentic collaboration. Firstly, this is collaboration, in capital letters, really embodied. So there's got to be a relationship between two or more organisations, and for me, that's got to be a formal relationship, one where the organisations are looking, as I've debated with David a few times, but looking to find win-win positions or a win for everybody. So for me, I think the organisations need to be seamlessly connected. I think there needs to be a real clear definition of purpose. The aims and objectives of that collaboration need to be very clearly articulated. Value is very well defined. And the way the organisations are going to work together is very, very clear in terms of a governance model that is put in place between those two or more organisations. So for me, this is from the shop floor to the top floor. We can't just talk about collaboration, little c, or we're going to work together to do something. It's got to be defined. I'm not going to talk about the 44,001 process a little bit later on, but for me, authentic collaboration does work around a framework or a model where those organisations are working together. But the second point, authentic collaboration for me, is around people. So we've got, working together, looking at how people interconnect with each other, looking at things like their emotional intelligence, looking at well-being, looking at diversity and inclusion, as well as looking at the learning and development that sits around that collaboration, how we share resource, the culture that we create together. And for me, I would probably say that's my top two. My third is, you need to be free to be a bit more like a pirate. I don't know if anyone's read Sam Conniff's book about be more like a pirate. Then that's what you've got to be in collaboration. You've got to be free to challenge, free to discuss, free to share ideas openly. I guess you need to have a level of psychological safety as well. So for me, that would be authentic collaboration.
Wonderful, thank you.
I would like, if I follow on from Steve and Jeremy, I would like to add, I think it's similar. It's about being an open and transparent culture. It's being able to have a very the clarity of purpose, but also being capable to have what I call difficult conversation. Very often in collaboration, people believe that collaboration is agreeing, with each other on everything. Actually, good, authentic collaboration is being comfortable with disagreement, is about being able to have that difficult conversation with respect and to transcend, disagreement, because there is that clarity of purpose and that capability to say we need to find a course to the ultimate goal. And associated to that, you need to be able, you need trust within the organization to allow people at the front line to make the decision. So it's about a framework of rules rather than very, very strict rules, so people can make decisions fairly quickly.
Thank you. And David, what's your take on this, on the question? Oh, we've got to unmute you, David.
We go.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, for me, what does authentic collaboration look like? We did an exercise a little while ago across our members, because we'd done some research in the past with senior executives, but we thought we'd ask the members what they felt. And some of the interesting feedback that we got was firstly, an environment for innovation. So not being afraid to challenge. Interesting enough, less tension, fewer meetings, less disputes and more solutions, and faster decision making. And I guess all of that comes back to what the earlier speakers said. It comes around creating an environment where there is trust in people. For me, I think collaboration is a natural human activity. The problem is we put too many barriers in place to stop it happening.
Great. No, I think it's interesting from what all of you have said. There's definitely a golden thread throughout that. I have to be honest. I love the idea of being a pirate in an organization. That sounds like fun, but in a way that then's going to challenge. Yeah, but I think you need the trust. The trust came out. The words purpose came out a lot with everyone that sort of mentioned something. Respect. Yeah, trust, purpose, and respect seem to be some of those overwhelming elements as part of being authentic in terms of the collaborative working. So that leads me on to the very next question then. So we've now got some wonderful ideas of how that operates and what that looks like. but getting the resourcing recipe correct in a company is quite a critical component as part of collaborative working. So when it comes to setting up the right behaviors, attitudes, and mixture of personalities or people for what we've established as an authentic collaborative working style, or what we're looking for, how do you achieve this? And how do you ensure you meet the requirements of the job while ensuring excellence in a one team and a shared one team approach? So it's a really hard question. So it's how do we now achieve that with our resourcing capability and the people we have?
Well, I'll kick off on that one and then leave it to the guys who are actually having to make it work. But the biggest issue for me is that we need to have a different kind of leadership. And I think today's world of the pandemic is showing that leadership has got to change in order that we do give more trust and don't try to micromanage people. If you want collaboration to work, then it's got to be an environment where people feel comfortable and that they can engage. I think everybody's got, in the main, everybody's got the ability to be collaborative. And I think the behaviors is more about what you measure rather than the behaviors themselves. I can always remember being told on my first visit to a construction site, the instruction manual for safety is 6 inches thick, but if you look after the people on either side of you, you'll go home safe. And I think that's the same philosophy that I think runs throughout a collaborative environment.
Great. Thanks, David.
Yeah, from I had, and it links exactly with what you've said, David, is for me, what I found is collaboration works best when you have what I call an outcome-based culture. So it's about not measuring, in singularity, the input or what I call the output, but more saying we have a group of people who are aiming to deliver an outcome. And by focusing on the outcome, you're more likely to map a course which will balance different requirements. It will allow more creativity and more space to work together. I think the other element you need in terms of driving the right culture, it's allowing time for people to get to know each other and to build on each other's strengths. So it's valuing, it goes back to diversity. So it's about valuing what each person can bring to the party and how each person or each company strengthen the other company or the other member of the teams.
Wonderful, thank you. It's interesting insight.
Yeah, so I go next from Babcock's perspective from years ago. We were trying to find out if we could get these behaviours. So we used the PDR process, and we used the standard to then basically get those collaborative behaviours and start measuring them across the company. And then we get people trained up and guided, and then put with mentors to make sure that if someone is very, very good at collaborative working, we will get someone who's not so good but needs to get there, and they work together in a sort of a buddy system. So they start learning there. And then when we start working on specific projects for things, we'll start looking for those people and put them in those key positions so they can start bringing people up to the same level. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's the key thing. The key is collaborative leadership. If the leaders aren't bought into it, then it fails pretty quickly. And we've seen that in some of our big projects where you've had very good leaders with good collaborative attributes, and they just sail through. Everyone goes with them. They learn a lot. They work together. As was said before, the diversity, people bring all their different ideas in, and it worked really well. And then we had another project very similar a few years later. We thought we had the right people in, and for some reason it wasn't clicking. So we brought in the people from that previous project, 3 of the senior people, and they stayed with them for a month again, buddy training people, getting them up to where they need to be. And then they stepped away and then monitored them and then came in. And then that works for us, and we can then replicate that throughout the business. So, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, from so far we've got to, before going to Jeremy, we've got leadership being mentioned, being tied to having sort of a complete map or course of where we're going to. And then equally, you've mentioned enabling people. I'm going to call it enabling through learning and development of their sort of skills to be collaborative. So far we've mapped that out. Jeremy, what do you feel about that question then, and what can you add to what's been said?
I think it's a great question, and I'll just kick off with leadership and go back to my pirate stuff. So You know,
Right.
Sam Conniff does talk around the fact that, you know, pirates face that, you know, a self-interested establishment, a broken system, industrial scale disruption, and an uncertain future, which for me sounds pretty familiar. So you need to have leadership in place. If the members go through to the Institute of Collaborative Working's website and go and take a peek in there, you'll see a lot of training material, a lot of discussion material, a lot of written material around collaborative leadership. But collaborative leadership needs to be wrapped around effective governance, Nikki, in my opinion. That governance would be that organisations set vision, they set strategic aims, they've got very clearly articulated and defined goals, and then they can wrap around key measures around that operating model. But of course, they've got to have the right culture, which I think is what Elaine mentioned before. But what I'd like to add to this discussion is, for me, the experience we've had, we've spent a lot of time with clients and customers and supply chain building collaborative models. As David said, sometimes you see health and safety manuals that are 6 inches thick. The one that always gets me is the 10-inch or the 10-foot in some cases thick legal T's and C's that sit around relationships, which have no bearing to collaboration. They belong in the bin, in opinion. But what we've done, we spent a lot of time on things like Carl Jung's discovery program, so the Margin and McCann models, starting to look at the kind of skills that we need to blend into collaboration to make it really work. We know that we need introverts, we know that we need extroverts, we know that we need people who are introverted thinkers, people who are practical, people who are analytical, people who are beliefs driven, and people who are structured, and the creatives. And when you can merge all of those people together, you truly can get some amazing results way beyond probably what you would if you haven't thought about that. So that's what I think about the resourcing recipe, is blending all those people together.
Right. I mean, it's actually very interesting from all four of you being able to create a really lovely picture of actually sort of what's required. It's just almost like we've got a bit of a plan. It's really good. You sort of all tackled it from different points. It's sort of like, well, there you go. There's a model for what we can do, and go sell that. Fantastic. Problem solved. So I think what's interesting in the next question is I think we talk about a lot about what's missing from our companies. And from my perspective, we get a lot of gaps and holes and where it's missing, or what we still need to do to enable effective or authentic collaborative working. So the next part for me as a question to all of you is, where have you seen that gold standard best practice examples in clients, and what does that look like for truly authentic collaborative workings? What has been sort of the outcome of that? Where have you seen that been a success, and what has really made it that success? If you could find that, that would be great. That'd be a great example.
Shall I go first, or are you going, Steve?
There you go. I'll go after you.
No, okay, I'll just give 3 examples. I would probably say we work with a company called United Utilities. They're a water and wastewater company in the Northwest, along with BA Systems that produce military aircraft in particular, and NATS, National Air Traffic Services, that do a lot of work to keep our people, well, when eventually we can fly back through UK airspace, to keep them safe. But what I would say, biggest for me success has been, we've removed what we call negative energy. So people who are working in collaborative models, again, not only psychologically free to perform, but they've got a high level of well-being, I guess a high level of psychological and physiological arousal, so that when they come into the workplace, they are giving the best that they possibly can. And you can only do that by doing some of the things that Elaine mentioned in the very opening question, which is freeing them up to perform right on the front line, giving them the permission to perform inside whatever framework that you've created. Wherever we've done that, and we've done good governance, and we've thought about people first, and we've thought about their health and their well-being, and we've involved them in decision-making, involved them in the governance models, we've involved them in our objective setting, we've had high levels of success.
Who would like to take a stab at the question next?
Okay, we're going to come in then again. I'll go next. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, with what Jeremy said there, and exactly the same. So we've had lots of different areas. We work with helicopters and obviously trying to get patients at the moment with COVID into the helicopter, and then have the safety of the pilots and obviously the medical crew that are with them has been paramount. So there are lots of thinking and learning from other countries that we operate in to see how best this could be done. So lots of ideas come up, and as Jeremy said, you allow people to have free thinking. Anyone can have an idea, and then we can trial it out, see if it works, what are the benefits, etc., and then pass it on to others. Another project we got asked to do recently was the Ventilator Project. obviously by the government, and we started from zero. We basically got together a group of 50 suppliers across the world to try and produce some of these ventilators, and we did that in 87 days from nothing, you know, and that was working everyone together, again, free thinking, and we actually had two separate designs working together, sort of co-competing to see which would be the best, with the best outcomes, and in the end there was a front runner, and now we've got those ready to go across, you know, whenever they need to be deployed, really. So yeah, it's good when you get free thinkers, as Jeremy said, working together. Any ideas come in, it works really, really well.
I think what you also mentioned there was co-competing, so it's not
Yep.
competitive in a negative sense that's going to that negative energy, so it's actually where it's a positive energy and positively geared.
Exactly, and as has been said before, it was the end goal to make sure that people are safe. We need these things, you know, people are potentially saving lives, so we need to make sure we do this in a short period of time, but it has to work, it has to be reliable, so which one's going to be the best? So yeah.
Right.
So I've got two examples from you know, two different industry. The first one would be actually for the railway, the rail industry, which is, as you know, quite complex industry with a lot of players, and a lot of the work is carried out over bank holiday, Christmas, New Year's break. The example I've got, which was recognized at an award as the best teamwork for that year, was renewing, you know, spending about 100 million. It was about 100 million worth of work to be delivered over a 10 days window. With quite a lot, something like 20 companies involved in that process, from contractor to train operating companies, including Network Rail, whom I work for. The success there was the complex delivering that complex work in quite a very short period of time, while and it was delivered successfully with, you know, a right level of safety, you know, right safety result, nobody was hurt, right outcome for the customer, very cost effective, and it was delivered because every single actor on that project was working towards one goal, which was minimizing impact of service to the customer. And I think it's where you can see when the outcome is bought in by every single players, you can overcome a lot of difficulties. And that was achieved through, as I say, clear outcome, and everybody buy into them, but also by empowering the frontline staff to deliver on the day and the night. So you didn't have a need to go back, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 management level in order to make every single decision. Your frontline staff, the people on site, were empowered to make that decision within, you know, at the time it was required, which means you deliver on time and on budget. Another example will be more recently in the water industry. As you know, leakage is a very hot topic, especially when you have a very dry summer. And again, similarly there, you know, delivering your leakage target for a water company, time is money, time is leakage. So it's how you empowered your frontline workforce to make decisions very, very quickly. And some of them, you know, are costly, deciding which equipment to use, but they are empowered to make that decision. And they understand how to balance different risk and different requirements while working safely. And so I would like to, you know, to reinforce what Jeremy said. In order to achieve, you know, very strong collaborative leadership, is start with, you know, also focusing on individuals, their safety, their well-being, and really making them feel, you know, looked after and cared about. So if you feel looked after, cared about, and you have a clear common goal, I think you unlock everything.
Right. Okay. So this is, yeah, especially for empowerment. Empowerment's come up as a fairly common theme that's come out throughout this, actually. So, yeah.
I'd endorse that. I mean, when I go around looking at collaborations, I guess the best measure I can give you is when a client is prepared to let an external partner make a decision on their behalf. And then, you know, you've really got a collaborative environment where that level of trust goes across. And it also means that in many cases, you can cut out a huge amount of administrative nonsense, man marking and all of that good stuff the moment you start to trust your partners.
Right. So I have to round that up. I mean, this, for me, that's quite fascinating to hear some really beautiful examples of where collaborative working can be unlocked. And I think Eliane, you mentioned it's the key to unlocking it. We all do sort of, and you've mentioned, we all do sort of have the potential, I suppose, to collaborate. Whether we want to do it or not do it is also about how it's unlocked in the first place. So for this fourth question, which I think is pertinent, I think, for now to unlocking it almost. So almost certainly every team and company is currently and will consistently go through change and adapting to a new working world. Specifically now we look at that. So focusing particularly on cultural and behavioral change. So looking at that as the focus. How do you think the integration of collaborative working methods and approaches will enhance managing change and supporting the people going through it? So I almost think this is the crux of everyone's asking this question at the moment. So how do we do that then?
Shall I start again?
Go for it.
Yeah, so part of the working with the ICW, we've had some special interest groups on the future of collaboration. And so we're producing a paper on that, which will come out shortly. But basically working with a company called Frost & Sullivan, who are looking at the future. And again, it's how people sort of can take this, the way things are changing, and adapt and move forward. And that's the key thing that's come out of this research I've been doing, really, is that people need lots of different skills, but the key skill they're going to need in the future is adaptability, because everything is changing so fast that they need to be able to immediately switch to something else and learn that and take it on quickly and then run with it and move forward and then go on to something else. And I wasn't quite sure about this when I first looking into it, but it's that the generation now, the younger generation, their brains are wired completely differently to the older generation, to myself, you know, and it's having to work. So it's the older generation having to work with the younger generation and using the skills that they both have to move forward. And it's been interesting using things like Zoom and WhatsApp and things like that. I managed a whole project online, which was a whole of a data center move. I didn't meet anybody. I'd never met people before, but I had to learn to trust them, to their experience online, and what they were doing, and then they would actually get things done in time. It was a 5-month project. I've never met them to this day face to face, only like we're doing now. And we managed to do that forward. And when I did some research on this, and you ask older people, they say, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. I have to be in a room with somebody, I have to look into the whites of their eyes, get to know them maybe, and go for a drink with them or something. Whereas the younger people, you talk to them and you say, so how, if you're online, you meet someone for the first time, do you trust them? And without even hesitating, they say yes, straight away. And that's the difference. So it's good in one way, and it's a bit negative in another, because then you're open to misuse of the internet and things like that as well, and people leading you the wrong way. But yeah, I think if we can harness both of those, I think the trust is the key thing. We have to start learning a bit more. The older generation have to start learning a bit more about that and use the technology and adapt and change and move forward. And I think that's what we really need to see moving forward.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in on that really difficult question?
I would agree with Stephen. I think for me, the element of, yes, it's about being agile, and it's about trusting. It's about knowing your skills. It's about knowing what you bring to the party, and embracing what other team member or other people bring to the party. And as you say, in terms of trusting, it's about starting with a glass half full, or giving people the benefit of the doubt in starting that relationship. So it's not about being naive. I think it's starting from a positive attitude rather than a negative attitude in how you engage people. It's also embracing the sense of possibility. And it goes back to that diversity element, where it's about being comfortable with what is different from you, and therefore being a lot more open to different view, different point of view, different type of experience, which allow you to go on that next step, or experience something you've never done, or trust someone else delivering for you. So I would agree with Steve. It's very much on that basis.
Right. I'm going to add an additional spin onto this, because we've both of you have mentioned that, before we go to the next two panelists, both of you have mentioned it's the positivity and the energy around that. The challenge with right now is people are tapped out, people are exhausted. There is a lot that we're dealing with, even within that element. So how on earth do you expect people to have a positive experience and force positivity upon someone so we can unlock collaborative working through change?
It's where it comes back to purpose. So is, you know, in any company, what is your greater purpose? Are you a purpose-led organization? And can you see how you add value to the wider community or society? So maybe, you know, having worked all my life in utilities, you know, being energy, water or rail, there is a notion of service. And therefore, you know, you can define yourself as key worker and understand how you make society work. But I think that's where every company have to define, you know, are we a purposeless organization? How do we add value to society? And therefore, in that context, that's where you bring that element of there's a positive element, because you know you contribute to the greater good.
And I totally agree with that. And that, you know, 85% of our staff are frontline staff, and so they've been working through the COVID, and so they can see that end goal. As you said, there is an end game here. We're looking after people. We're getting them to help, you know, quickly into the hospitals, and so that is what motivates people in our organisation.
Shall I go, David?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I've got three very quick observations. Absolutely agree with everything that Steve and Elaine have said there, but you may have read a book by Thomas L. Friedman, The World is Flat, and the future is now, not a distant point in time. And I really believe in that. And that's important for the 2 points I'm going to say now. We strongly believe that to effect change, there are two things you need to do. We need to bring in sort of elite sports person's mentality into the business place, and think about creating human-centric organizations, which for me aligns to what Elaine said about business for purpose, not for profit, as was discussed at Davos a little bit earlier this year. So the kind of things we were doing, we're looking at things like, you know, the impact of increased dopamine in people, oxytocin, serotonin, for example, endorphins. So how do those create positive experience for people in the workplace? How does that make you feel better? How does that relieve stress? How does that make you communicate freely and far more easily? When you start to look at what makes sports people so much better, what makes them go that extra mile, or people that do elite activities, maybe going exploring Arctic, for example, why do they do that? How do we bring that into the workplace? I think firstly, when we start to look at people and value people as real people and not as objects, then you will be able to effect change very, very quickly in a world where the future is today. And then I think the second one for me around this is really about things like, we use all kinds of different models and fuse them into our collaborative model. So recently we've been working on the second model of knowledge transfer. So we're looking at socialization, we're looking at externalization, identification, and how do we transfer knowledge and information and make people fully understand. Once people fully understand the mission, aim and goal of what you're trying to achieve, they get behind it. And it's surprising how much power you get and how quickly you can affect change. So that's the two things I would add to the conversation so far.
Two big things.
I just got one input to that, which I find quite amusing actually, is the concept of collaborative working affecting change or facilitating change. Collaborative working is about change. It's about changing the way that we were brought up. It's changing the way we were educated, how businesses were run in the past. So it is in itself change. And I remember a friend of mine in the Pentagon who said, when we introduced the structure of collaborative working, his response was, I think this is a great idea, because if I give it to my civil servants, in 5 years' time, they won't realize they've changed. And I think that sort of captures the essence of what we at ICW have been trying to do for a long time, is to say, you know, it is all about change. And I think, you know, when we talk about these fast teams and high performing teams, if anybody's read The Team of Teams with General Crystal, it is an eye-opener to what can happen when you bring in the best of the best, but don't allow them to work together. So, I think it's quite funny. I think, collaborative working is about change, and it's a constant change. And I think that's the thing that many find difficult to do, because it will be evolving daily. And every single relationship you have will be slightly different to the one you just left. And I think that change is something that we've gone through in the past, where it's been process change, it hasn't been people change.
Right, I tend to agree with you. I think interestingly about what you've said is, for me, it's integrated into ways of working. So I think it can very easily be a topic that companies might be, right, let's do a tick box exercise and demonstrate we're collaborative. And so going through that process where, right, we've gone to meetings, we've done X, Y, and Z, now we're collaborative, we can tick that box. And actually, it's more about that integrated way of being, way of thinking, from the top down, bottom up approach. It's a whole way of changing in itself, to gear towards collaborative working. And I think that's kind of what, going into the next question, so where it leads into. So for those who are listening to this and who probably either don't know or are aware of, there's the ISO 44001, which is an international standard on collaborative working. This is developed through the ICW. And the ISO in itself is sort of, it pulls apart what collaborative working really is. The major change from the collaborative, from the British standard through to the ISO, was that there was a fundamental change in requiring a behavioral difference in the way we work collaboratively. So that's going to be something that's really interesting. A lot of companies have grabbed onto it to try to look at how we can actually implement this and include this into major programs and projects. So I want to ask my panelists, let's talk about the ISO, let's talk about the collaborative working ISO itself. Practically speaking, how do you think that this can actually be authentically applied, not in a tick box exercise, to support the success of projects or programs in companies?
Okay, so what we do, we don't, as an organisation, and I don't advocate it myself, is going for the certification, as you mentioned there, just the tick box exercise. So I've been doing quality for a long time, and in the past, that's what used to happen. Just get the certificate on the wall, great, move on, we can get loads of contracts from that. But the way we apply things now is we would apply the framework of a standard. So we put those in anyway, and we build that into the way we work on a daily basis. So any changes to that we keep up to date, and we will adapt our quality system to subsume those new changes. And then it makes it easier in the future if a customer does come along, or someone says, oh, we need to go for certification because we have to prove it to someone else. And then we can easily then say, yep, come along and check what we're doing and go through, and you can see. And then it becomes more organic because it's then built into the DNA of the company. And that way, the people then go along with that more. They're very easy to adapt when you want to make a small change to something. And as I say, it's very easy then to move on and use that in the future. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing is looking at the ISO 44001 standard for the ICW. So if anyone's interested, come and get in contact with me. I need to know, because we know that it's a bit clunky for small and medium companies to adapt and use. Larger companies, again, can throw resources at it sometimes to get it working if they need to, and use the framework. But so I'm going to be looking at what's working well, what isn't working so well, and then we can get some recommendations together to change it and improve it to move forward. Because sometimes it can be clunky, but yeah, so that's where we are with that at the moment.
If I add there, for me, it goes back to what David was saying. You need to make sure that it's not owned by the assurance team and seen as a process tick box exercise, but actually more owned almost by your people development, because it's all about people. So it's more seen as a guidance to how do you do day-to-day management? How do you use it as a benchmark to say, are we behaving in the right way? Are we developing our people? And reinforcing behaviors in such a way that if someone was to come and do an audit, they could say, yes, I can see the right behavior taking place.
I think it might be better for me to go next, as David is probably more akin to being the technical author of 44,001. But I think from my view, I said I would disagree with some of my colleagues. I don't think it's too clunky. I think the 8-stage framework in particular for collaboration is an iterative process. I think it's well defined and it's well written, and it can be used for small, medium, as well as large scale enterprise. Where it becomes, I think, clunky and difficult is the fact that it's an international standard, and the way that the new high-level structure has been put together for those of you familiar with it. So for me, I think Elaine's bang on. It can't go in the insurance team. As Steve said, it can't be a tick box exercise. If you're in procurement, please don't put pre-qualification questionnaires together asking organisations to be certified to 44,001 and then thinking suddenly you're in a collaborative relationship, because that does not make a collaboration. Collaboration is about authenticity, about two organisations or more working closely together. So that's what I would offer on 44,001 before handing over to David.
Right.
Well, that's good. I'm agreeing with all of them. I think one of the challenges is today, the heading for this session was collaboration. And I think the big challenge is that collaboration is a concept. It's not a solution in itself. Collaborative working without a process or without some governance is probably chaos. Collaborative behaviours are what you need to make it work. And I think what the standard tried to do, and I think it's one of the disappointing things for me as somebody who's championed it for 15 years, was the fact that too many organisations saw this as a process. Right, we've got the process, that's it. Collaboration is a natural outcome of that. What they missed is the fact that every single requirement that was put in there was put in because it has a direct impact on the way people behave. And if you don't address the impacts, you don't get the behaviour. So we have gone through a period of organisations rushing to get a sticker on the wall. I do a lot of work with the certification bodies, and my first question to a collaborative process is, so what? So you've got the process, but can you demonstrate it delivers? And I think that's the big question that organisations, what we are seeing now is organisations who took that first process route, beginning to understand that actually it's not enough on its own. And you have to build these other activities and these other elements, which is why we're looking at things like collaborative leadership, behaviours. I will say, we have lots of magical tools for measuring behaviours. Personally, I think a large proportion of them are misguiding organisations. You can't put people into numbers.
I think that's going to be in itself quite a challenging comment that you've just made.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's the point of the discussion.
But I think primarily, for me, and I think the point was made, organisations see a standard as something that they can latch onto as part of a pre-qualification. They're making the fundamental mistake, and that is you can't mandate collaboration. It's an oxymoron. It has to evolve and it has to develop between the parties that are involved in it. And all the framework does is give you a whole series of questions in order to understand how you view and what your expectations are. Excuse me.
Well, so just to take over from that point, I think interestingly enough, there's quite a few questions that have come up around this, and we've actually all spoken about it not being a sort of one-stop solution, a one-stop area. You can't just go and insert collaboration into anything. There's a whole host of considerations that need to go into making this a success in an organization. And you've all alluded to a load of different solutions and loads of different ways that we can actually incorporate this. So we've got a Q&A sort of section here, and we've got a few questions I'd like to try to go through. So to the panelists, there's a few lovely things that have come through. So some of them I think we've sort of answered, so I'm going to try to pick out a few. One of which is an interesting one. So not all personality types, so not all different types of people enjoy collaborating or enjoy collaboration. I suppose, depending what your version of that is, but have interesting thoughts and ideas as well. So how do you cater for the varying volumes of voices? And this is from Ali Barrett. So this would be, I think from my perspective for that, from what I understand, is going to be, how do you cater for all the different voices? If you've got, I think with collaboration, in the way that often it's sort of put into organizations, it's almost going, everyone gets a voice, but at the same time, it's allowing everyone to have a voice, but doing it in the right way. So it's not just a load of noise coming at you. So how do you have that balance?
Well, I think it was mentioned earlier on that you need a spectrum of people involved in any program to make it successful. Collaboration shouldn't frighten away people. In fact, I'm sure it wouldn't, but it comes back to the leadership ensuring that there is an opportunity for those voices to be heard. And I think it's tolerance from others, which say, because somebody doesn't rush towards you and wrap their arms around you, although in the current environment, you're not allowed to do that anyway. Everybody is different. And it's being aware of that and having that awareness that nobody, my experience is very few people come to work to fail, and they all want to contribute and they all want to go home and be successful. And I think it's about, how do you create that environment where they don't feel that they're suppressed by a euphoric approach to collaboration, which has very little substance to it.
Right. Okay.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go. So, who would like to go first?
So, if you don't mind. So, for me, I think when that question is about answering that question about the balance between what I call cooperation, control, and autonomy, and it's recognizing for different questions, the balance between these three is different. So, if you're looking at, health and safety, or you're in a very, very dangerous situation, when we're looking at safety on site, we're more in a position of control, which is, you shall wear safety boots, you shall wear, that element of PPE. And there, it's not about cooperation or collaboration or actually autonomy. We're in a control position. And when we recognize people who say they're more comfortable with cooperation, it's understanding and flagging where to deliver the right outcome, you need to have the right level of cooperation, and recognizing for certain role, you're more in an autonomy, more autonomous role or more control role. And it's flagging that very, very clearly. And therefore for that, you need an element what I call, you always will have in a team what I call integrators, people who will go and seek out others, position, others' view, and bring it back to the rest of the group. So it's understanding that balance.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Elaine. I mean, at EMCO, we're fairly simple with this. We do employee engagement, where we ask people around collaboration. We've got online chat rooms where people can chat and talk about collaboration, offer ideas. And then we've got collaborative champions across the business, so people can go and speak to them, talk to them, find out more about it, offer insight or offer thoughts around it. So, but from our perspective, a little bit more practical, really.
Yeah, exactly, and I agree with all that you said there, and that's what we do as well. It's all about communication. It's understanding how people are comfortable to communicate. If they're comfortable to communicate in an environment where there's lots of people and they're more outgoing, then that's fine. If someone's more introverted, as I think Jeremy said earlier on, you've got an introverted person, how do you get them to get the ideas? Because they've got valid ideas, but they just have to be comfortable in a way that they can communicate those ideas out. So if it's sending an email or whatever, and as Jeremy said, you create those environments, you create the chat rooms in SharePoint or something like that, where people can then collaborate, dump ideas out, people can comment on it, and someone's monitoring that to make sure that it's the right way. So yeah.
I actually have a question now specifically for Steve, as soon as I quickly find it. So while you're here. So this is from Steve Sodden. Steve, you mentioned that the young generation are more trusting. So, oh, here it comes. And so do you believe that there are fewer bad actors in this generation? Or in other words, are they more ethical, or are they naive and bound to be disillusioned by the actions of cynical players?
Right.
Wow.
Well, Yeah, so this is what I've been looking into, the research, and I'd say that you know, for the older person, they're used to working in a certain way, and I think this change has come pretty quickly with the COVID, and it's seeing the way that people are used to using their electronic devices has brought this change about. And so people the younger generation are used to swapping between devices more and more. And so the research I've been looking at is where you get the younger generation can sit there, they could be watching this online, they can be doing some work on a computer somewhere else and doing something else at the same time. So it's a wide and different way. To be more trusting, I think it's that again, the older people, it's the way that we have been brought up to meet other people in different environments in business. So you go to business meetings or whatever, or you have lunches or whatever it happens to be, where you feel comfortable, where you're actually talking to someone one-to-one. Whereas the younger people, again, they're used to working with people online more, trusting them more, and they can get more information quicker that way. So, so yeah, I don't know if they're more cynical, but I think the older generation are more cynical of the new technology, and that's where we have to sort of break down barriers and show that it does work and you can deliver things using this technology.
Great.
I don't know if that answered the question, but
it was a good attempt.
I'd just add to that, though, Steve. I think one of the questions that has come up numerous times, and you work in some fairly secure environments, and that is that I think we have to harness the power of the young people's ability to use this technology, but we probably need to give them better education in the risks of using it.
Yeah.
Depending on the organisation you're in. But I know.
Yeah, we do that. Yeah, that's exactly a very good point. So we have very high security, and so we do have our security manager who will do regular checks on that sort of thing to make sure people are brought up to date with training, how to manage their social accounts, media accounts, and things like that, to make sure that they are safe as possible. So yeah, it's bringing people, as you say, the awareness of the risks of trusting somebody straight away, without maybe doing a bit of a background check or things like that on them. So yeah.
Right, I actually have a lovely question that's come through. I personally quite like this one. It's going to challenge all of you, I think. So from the perspective, so it's Rod Eames has mentioned. So how do you know when an organization is not collaborative? And how would you go about changing it so it is collaborative? So I think we sort of almost answered that, but actually the first part of that is most companies will go, oh, we're collaborative, there's the value statement, we've got it all over there, and it's enhanced in all the meetings. How do you actually assess how collaborative a company or organization is, apart from being in the organization?
Well, for us, sometimes it's the very first meeting. I think, as was alluded to earlier on by Jeremy, I think it was, we've had some customers who would come to us and say, we want to be collaborative, we are collaborative, and we want you to create this collaborative project to deliver X. And we go, great. And they say, okay, so how are you going to do collaboration for us then? so
right, exactly.
so then you have to go into this whole educational piece, and and you do get some customers who, again, the organization is actually collaborative and they want to do this, and you can see the behaviors and you can see the structures are correct, but then the top leadership is not quite there. So again, you have to spend time with those people trying to re-educate them. And with some of the work we do, we're quite lucky because some of the people at the top will move off in 2 years anyway. So we know they're going to go somewhere else and be redeployed or whatever, and we'll get someone else in who we can then talk to, and maybe they're better. So for us, it's easier that way. But yeah, you do see it very quickly and pick it up like that. So yeah.
Great. I think we've, oh, sorry.
If I could just pop in there.
Sure.
Jeremy mentioned earlier on the 8-stage model that we developed, which forms a sort of backbone of the standard. And to be honest, if you work through that process and address those questions, you very quickly get a view of whether the partner you're talking to understands what they mean by collaboration. And it does actually help to draw out those issues. And you do get, and we've had cases where people have gone halfway around that process and then said they don't want to collaborate, or they don't want a collaborative relationship because it's quite clear that that wasn't going to deliver, and that they hadn't really got themselves ready to do it.
Right.
And I think that's one of the benefits of the framework, is it's not just making it right, it's also making it clear when it isn't right.
Great. I'm going to have to, unfortunately, pause at this juncture. So we've got 5 minutes left to the end. I wanted to say thank you to our panelists for answering the very difficult questions, and I think a very interesting spin on different perspectives of what collaborative working is. We've got a Q&A session after this, so if whoever can go through to this, whoever's listening, it'd be lovely for you to join the panelists after the session. Go and have a chat to them, ask them all the questions, challenge them, so, for those that can make it in the next section. So I really want to say thank you so much for joining us.